Hello everyone, welcome to this live stream on scaling and moderation. My name is Jamon, and there's... Oh, hi, yes, there is someone here. Hello. We'll wait a few minutes for people to join, I guess. Hey, hope you guys are having a really good week so far. Hope the first day has been okay. Hope the term's going really good. Yeah, all the good vibes and all that sort of stuff. No, I'm not going to let anyone join this live stream because I've tried that once and it ended badly, so I'm not doing it again. I'm forever scarred. Hello. So yeah, this live stream is going to cover pretty much every aspect of scaling, moderation, alignment, and exactly how your ATAR is calculated. We're going to go through it step by step. We're going to cover sort of the three main steps of the process, that being scaling, moderation, and alignment. That's sort of the way I like to divide it because it's three sort of semi-separate processes, okay? So we're going to step through them through the hour. After each section, I'll sort of throw to you guys and ask if you have any questions. I took a really good look at all the questions that were sent to us over the weekend, and I basically filtered out the one. A lot of them I'm just going to answer as I go because they were just how does scaling work. But I picked out a few of the ones that I thought were really interesting, and I'll sort of get to them as I go. I may swap to my laptop from time to time, like my very nice impromptu studio lighting setup here. Okay. Yes, I've also been waiting for this. So yeah, I might wait like another 60 seconds, grab a drink, grab a snack. I have a drink. I don't have a snack. And we will get started very shortly. I know maths is on. I realized I was competing with maths literally 5 minutes ago because I went out to tell my family, hey, I'm streaming, don't come in. I've got a very haphazardly written sign on my door. And they were watching maths, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm competing with the hottest reality TV show on Australian television. Maybe I should... You know what? If I give examples, I will use maths contestants' names. That's what I will do. That will be the blend. And then maths can share this stream, and ATAR notes will be the biggest thing since Innes, I guess. I was never seriously into maths, but when your fiance's mad into it, you've sort of got to get into it. Okay, so what I've done for you guys to sort of help illustrate some of these points is I've actually dug up my HSC credentials. Yes, please do actual work while watching this. This is just fancy procrastination. That's all this actually is. Okay, so I actually went and dug up my HSC credentials. So I've got my very fancy certificate. This is the thing that NISA misprinted for last year's cohort. Hello. Where's the interesting stuff? Okay, so then I pulled out the stuff that's actually relevant and important, and that is the actual record of achievement, which has your marks on it. I don't know if they send you this anymore, but you still have this. It might not be printed and sent to you. But you get a record of achievement. You get one for stage 5 as well, but I'm just going to use the year 12 one, the stage 6 one. And then the other thing I've pulled out with a sticky note over it to cover my address is my ATAR advice notice. So I'm sort of going to reference these and show you what the numbers mean. Your one headphone list, if you can listen to me and watch maths at the same time, then you're definitely going to get a 99.95. That is definitely multitasking to a degree that I can certainly not handle. Your English essay can wait. Let's get started. Okay, so when you get your HSC marks, yeah, this is the thing I'm looking for. Okay, so when you get your HSC marks, swaps, you will get something that looks like this. It's very pretty and very nice, and it's also lovely. And this is essentially how you will get your HSC marks. It will be sent in a text to you, and the text will be an abbreviated version of this. And this is what you'll get. You'll get courses, so these were mine, and you'll get 4 things, I guess, but 3 actual numbers. So you'll get an exam mark, an assessment mark, and then the average of those is the HSC mark, and that's like your actual mark that you will be needing to pay attention to. And then those correspond to performance bands, of course. So I had 12 units worth of subjects as well as a retail services exam that I don't have a mark for because I didn't sit the HSC exam for it. I chose not to at the last minute. I did sit the trial exam for it though, without studying. Go me. Okay, so what I'm going to go through first is where these 2 numbers come from, because it's maybe not as simple as you might expect. Now, what you'll notice is that my assessment marks and exam marks all line up, except for this one, which is legal studies, and that's the subject I didn't come first in. And that will hopefully be obvious why that didn't line up after we're done talking about today. But that's why this happened. I was first in all of these, except for legal. I wasn't first in that, and that's why that's different. Okay, so I think the smartest way to start this is literally go from left to right and to first talk about the examination mark, where the exam mark comes from. By the way, everything I'm talking about today, I wrote a guide summarizing all of this. It's on ATAR notes, and I'll probably pop it in our Instagram bio and maybe shove it on Snapchat too or something after this stream is done, or tomorrow. So everything is summarized. We also summarize all of this in our HSC survival guide, which you can purchase for $20 off atarnotes.com's shop. Obvious plug is obvious, I guess. I did write this. I get nothing for promoting it, but I do think it's a really cool resource for $20. Okay, moving on. So the examination mark that appears on your certificate is not your raw mark from the HSC. That's not how this works. So, of course it's not. That'd be too simple. So the way that your examination mark that comes through in your text message comes to be, so this thing, that is your aligned HSC mark. And so what alignment means, and this is the first process I'll talk about, is it's mapping your performance in the exam as an individual to descriptive performance targets as determined by NISA, okay? So when you sit the exam, you will get a mark out of 100, or if it's not out of 100, it will be changed to be out of 100. For example, the Maths Extension 1 exam is out of 70. They'll swap that, right? Okay, so you get this mark out of 100, but you can't just take that and stick it as an exam mark. And the reason for that is that exams can vary in difficulty, okay? You can't equate exams across years. You can't just use the mark as it is, because there's a whole lot of factors unaccounted for. So a few things actually happen, even just getting this exam mark to come up. So the first thing they do, or in their process, one of the things they do, is that they come up with what's called band cutoffs. Now, what a band cutoff is, and a lot of people have heard of a band cutoff, what a band cutoff actually is a number that sort of corresponds to where they would expect a student of that band to have performed. So what I mean by that is a band 6 cutoff represents the mark that they would expect a band 6 student to have been able to achieve. Okay, so what that actually means in practice is that they go through the exam responses, they have meetings, they have a lot of discussion, and they sort of decide where these cutoffs will sit. And what it roughly corresponds to is exam difficulty, right? So they'll sort of decide how tough the exam was based on the responses and map the responses so it's fair. So if you have a hard exam, you will be compensated for that through this alignment process, okay? Now, the first question that comes up whenever they say that is, where the hell do you find out what these cutoffs actually are? And so to that, I'm going to swap to my camera. You will Google something called the Raw Marks database. It's the first thing that comes up. I have no idea who maintains this resource, but it is fantastic. And it is basically a database of raw marks as obtained by students, because what you can actually do is you can go to NISA and request a copy of your exam and see what your raw mark was and compare it to the mark on your certificate, which is your aligned mark. And so you can sort of get a feel for what the cutoffs are. So in fact, this is all quite recent data. Let's use this. So this is 2018's data. And it looks like an 82 and an 81 both mapped to an 891. So it looks like the band 6 cutoff was roughly an 80. Yeah? So that's how that exactly works, okay? So you can do this for all sorts of subjects. You can see how it changes over the years. And this is sort of the process that you will see, okay? Obviously, now keep in mind these are all submitted by students. There's no way to vet these numbers, but I don't see any reason for students to lie about this sort of thing. Like, I don't see what they would benefit from that. We got some more recent ones for physics, yeah. So that sort of shows you what the cutoff process looks like, okay? Now, there are other things that happen in the process. So one of the other things that they do is what's called optional question scaling. And what that means is that they will look at the responses across different electives and options for subjects that have them, like the old physics course did, like English, etc., etc. And they will map or equalize the responses to make sure that everyone's sort of treated fairly. So if you have a text where the question is quite difficult, or something like that, then you will be compensated for that again through this process. What you'll notice is that this is aiming to equalize things to make things fair, right? And so that process, that magic, that optional question scaling, the band 6 cutoffs, and a few other little things that I guess aren't really worth going into, about making your exam mark fair before it appears here. Okay, so that is your exam mark, and that's the thing to highlight. That is your performance on the final exam and your performance only. This isn't affected, this exam mark, this is totally unaffected by your rank and totally unaffected by your assessments. That means that half of your HSC mark comes entirely from your exam. Totally from your exam, which means that the most important thing to do well on is the HSC exam, right? Because half of it comes directly from that. So if you're going to do well on anything, you're going to do well on that final, and doing well on the final is enough to make up for bad performance earlier on in the year. That's alignment. So the alignment is this process of making your exam marks fair to be reported to you as a student. That's how alignment works. So I'm going to pause there for any questions. If you have any about alignment, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, I'll come back to them later. I think someone asked something about... So one of the questions I got over the weekend was how the new courses will affect this process. They specifically asked about scaling, but it'll affect this as well. So the answer to that is we don't know. It will depend, and that's why this process is in place, to make sure that you're treated fairly in this transition, right? That's the whole reason this is here, to make sure that this works properly. How did your marks line up like that then, like equal number? That will become apparent very shortly. So this is literally what I got in the exam. Like, this is my aligned, not raw, this is my aligned score in the exam. The reason my assessment marks are the same will become apparent very shortly. Just bear with me. We'll get to that in just a tick. So we don't know how the new courses will affect this, but like that's the reason this is there, to make sure it's fair. So that's fine. What are some other things I got asked? I've shown you that raw marks database. So that's a good resource to look at for your subjects if you're interested. Yeah, I guess that's probably the simplest of the three processes, right? How do you form a mark goal for a subject like science extension when you don't know how it scales? Great question. Aim for 100, right? Like, just aim as high as you can. You have no previous data to go on, although I personally think science extension will scale probably fairly similarly to Maths Extension 1. That seems sensible to me. We don't know. Obviously, that's just a guess, but just aim as high as you can. Look, this shouldn't be worrying you anyway, and the big thing that, like, that's another big thing I wanted to point out at the start. I should have done it at the start. None of this actually matters, right? I'm just going to watch my live stream count just plummet because this actually doesn't matter. It will affect you, but it's totally out of your control. So it's not worth worrying about, right? You should aim for as high as you can and let the system do what it needs to do, because trust me, I've seen this system at work for years. I think it's a good system. It will treat you fairly if you're putting the work in. I've never met anyone who was treated unfairly by this system. And, I've met people who say they were treated unfairly by this system, but then you press them and they were like, I really just didn't work hard enough, right? So this system is good. Trust this system, okay? I'm not a NISA plant, but NISA actually has a good systems in place for this sort of thing. Does the performance of your school cohort affect alignment or scaling? No, it affects your internal ranking, and that sort of thing, which I will get to very shortly. So if we do in our HSC, that will compensate for any poor performance. Absolutely. So it doesn't remove it, but as you can see, a huge part of your final result is this examination mark. So maximizing that is a really good thing. Will new syllabuses have much of an impact on Band 6 cutoffs? I just talked about that. We don't know. I would guess that they will have a semi-decent impact, but probably nothing substantial. How do TAFE ATAR courses scale in the HSC? We'll get to scaling in just a little bit. I'll explain it. So bear with me on that. If I fail my first exams, would it have any effects later on? Again, we're getting into... I'm going to talk about rankings, okay? I'm going to talk about rankings because that's where people are heading with these questions. Yes, that's what all of these questions are based on. So I'm going to get to rankings now. So bear with me, people, while by the way, highly recommend this Schweppes Lemon Lime Bitters mixers thing. It's very good. Okay, so... Band 6 cutoffs. I explained it a little bit earlier. If you're joining in late, you might have to go. I'm going to pop a link to a guide on all of this in the Instagram bio as soon as this is done. So roll with me here a little bit. Okay, so rankings. This thing, I will absolutely be leaving. So what I did for the live last time is I popped it on YouTube because Instagram doesn't let me upload it because it's an hour long, and Instagram hates 1 hour long videos unless you have 20,000 followers, which we don't. Invite your friends. Maybe I can get it up later tonight. It'll be on YouTube within a day or two. So, YouTube. Okay. What was I talking about? I'm going to take a sip of drink. Rankings. Okay. You're welcome. So, this thing. Everyone screws up exactly how this works, and everyone panics about it. And so I'm going to try and do a really good job of explaining where this comes from. This assessment mark. What's the easiest way to explain this? So, okay, let me give an overall sort of. Oh, thank you. I'm glad it's helpful. Okay, so let me give an overall sort of summation of where that mark comes from before I go into an example. So, that mark comes from the performance of your cohort in the exam mapped to your ranks. Okay, so conceptually I want to establish the reasons for it before I go into what happens. So every school in the state has internal assessment marks that rank their students and give the students marks. NISA gets those and they go, well, we really can't trust the marks themselves. And this is fair, because what if my school was just really, really generous and gave me hundreds for everything? You can't take those marks and use them. It's totally biased and totally inherently flawed to do that. What is assumed to be fair is the positions of the students in the cohort. It's assumed that even if a school will mark more easily, that they'll still mark fairly amongst the cohort, if that sort of makes sense, okay? So they're assuming the schools are fair amongst themselves, but maybe not with each other. I hope that makes sense. So the solution to that is we're going to use the ranks, but we aren't going to use the marks. And so you go, okay, the ranks are set. Where do the marks actually come from? The marks come from the only thing that everyone in the state does, and that's the HSC exams. Okay, so what they do is they take your marks and they swap them. They don't swap them. That's a bad word. They take your marks and they map them to your ranks. Okay, so I actually wrote an example on this in the guide that I've got on ATAR notes, and so I'm just going to pull that up because that's just the easiest way to do this. Okay, so here are your 3 things that happen before I show you the example. So 3 things. Use this system and it will explain absolutely everything you want to know about rankings. First thing that happens, so this is what NISA has. Should I draw a table? Maybe I can't draw a table and hold a phone. No, I'll use the example. Okay, so the first, I can't decide how I'm doing this. The first thing they do, the first person in the course, the highest ranked person, rank 1, they get the highest mark in the exam room as their assessment mark. Let me say that again. So the person in ranked first place gets the highest mark in the exam room as their assessment mark. That immediately explains why my marks are the same. Because I ranked first in my course, let's just use English Advanced. I ranked first in the course, and I got an exam mark of 96, but my assessment mark was also 96. What that means is my mark of 96 was the highest in the room, meaning I also got it as my assessment mark. Okay? If I wasn't first, that 96, this one I would still have it, but this 96 would have gone to somebody else. Does that make sense? This column is locked. This is mine. I earned this. You are not taking away my exam marks, NISA. I did this. But these are rank-based. So that 96 is up for grabs for whoever is coming first in the cohort. It just so happens that was also me. So, first thing they do is give the highest mark to the highest ranked person. The second thing they do is I will explain why that's not, it is actually very fair, and I'll explain why. So, I sound awful saying that, but it is fair. I'll sort of explain why. The second thing they do is they give the lowest mark in the room to the lowest ranked person, okay? So whoever got the lowest mark in the room, that goes to the lowest ranked person, right? Thing to keep in mind, again, I want to stress this because this is what people screw up. The exam mark is yours. You did that. That is yours and yours alone. That's why I stress how important it is to do well in the HSC. That is yours. This is cohort based. That mark is cohort based, okay? So let me show, and then the third thing they do is they sort of shift everyone else to be in line with those two. So they move the maximum and the minimum, and then they sort of shift the curve of everyone else to where it needs to be. Let me show you an example, because this is getting confusing. So, all right, here are we? Cool. Here is my very apt, I think I've rewatched Chronicles of Narnia right after I did this. So here is my lovely, here's my lovely table of Peter, Susan, Lucy, and Edmund. These are their school assessment marks. Okay, so these are the marks that you would have gotten in your school reports. Okay, these are the corresponding ranks. This is just 94 was first, 92 was second, 72 was third, 65 was fourth. Okay, so that's simple. These are their exam marks. Right? So these are the marks they got in the room. Let's see exactly what that does to the assessment marks. So let's apply our rules. The person who came first was Peter. Okay, so Peter came first. So his exam mark of 90, let's assume that's aligned, by the way, like that's done all the processes, that's what's on the certificate. So his rank is first, so his exam mark of 90 is his, but his assessment mark, which would be this imaginary column here, that gets filled with whatever the highest exam mark is in the room. That's 92. So he would get a 90 for his exam mark and a 92 for his assessment mark. Okay? And those would average, there you go, to a 91. Then we go to the last person in the room. That just happens to be Lucy. She came fourth. The lowest exam mark in the room was actually hers. It was 70. Therefore, her exam mark is 70. And her assessment mark is also 70, because it's the lowest mark in the room. It also happens to be her mark. Those average, she gets a 70 in total. The other two are trickier, but what's the big thing to understand is that they try and keep the gaps quite similar. What you'll notice is that in this system, in the internal system, Susan came quite close to Peter. Peter got a 94, Susan got a 92. Susan's mark as second won't necessarily get Peter's mark of 90, even though it's the second highest, but she will get something close to Peter, because they try and keep relative distance, okay? Edmund is a fair bit ahead of Lucy and a fair bit behind Susan. So it's likely that Edmund's exam mark is 80, but his moderated internal mark will be somewhere keeping that distance from the top and bottom, right? This is a really complicated process. This is not meant to be easy. Let me another little example, okay? So let's paper. Cool. That is not the paper I wanted. I want this paper. Cool. Okay. Let's do another example, because this is confusing. Oh shit! I'm nearly halfway through already. Okay. So, let's go with some maths contestants. Where's my permanent marker? I had one. There it is. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to do my best at one-armed example. I think I can do this. Okay. So let's say we've got three students. Ines, I have no idea if that's how you spell her name. Who are the really annoying ones in this season? I think Jess is annoying this year. And we'd better stick a guy in. Let's go Mick. Okay. So, here are our three students. No, let's go a fourth, because a fourth makes it more interesting. Who else do we want? We want Bronson? Yeah, let's stick Bronson in. Okay. All right. So, let's go through this. So, let's say that internal exam and then moderated. This one is what goes on the certificate. That circled thing is this. Okay, so what I'm circling, that's what this column is. Okay? All right, so here's how it works. Let's just go down the line and let's say Ines got 95, Jess got 90, Mick got 75, and Bronson got 50. I'm just trying to make the marks very different to make it obvious, okay? All right, so that was their internal marks, right? And so clearly, this is first, this is second, this is third, and this is fourth. All right, let's say that in the exam, Ines has... Who did she hook up with behind Bronson's back? I forget. Sam, no, Bronson was the original. I don't know. I don't pay enough attention to maths. But let's say that she's just hooked up with someone else. I've got no idea what's going on. And let's say that her exam mark is 60. She really drops compared to where she was internally. Jess, however, really does well and surges to a 98. Then Mick, let's say he holds steady. Let's say he improves to an 85. And let's say Bronson also makes a huge improvement to an 80. Okay, let's do that. That's an interesting system, I guess. Okay, so let's look at what happens. Remember, rule 1. Highest ranked person gets averaged, or gets their internal mark becomes their internal moderated assessment mark matches the highest exam mark. In this case, that's Jess's. So that would be 98. Okay, so these two numbers in the last two columns, they're the two numbers on the certificate. That's what you've got to look. That's what you've got to parallel to. So these two numbers for Ines are these two numbers for me. That's where this is coming from. This mark here, and I want to stress this again, this exam mark is Ines's mark. She got that mark. It's no one else's. She got 60. That is her exam mark. This comes from the combination of her rank of first and how her cohort did in the exam. See how that works? Let's go to the last place, Bronson. Bronson came last, so he gets the lowest mark in the room. It also happens to be his mark, it's 80. Therefore, he gets averaged with 80. Okay? You can calculate HSC marks from here, by the way. The average of 98 and 60, aka the average of these two numbers, from average of 96 and 96 is 96. Average of 98 and 60 is 79, I think. That's Ines's mark. That's her final mark. She got a high band 4 in, I don't know, what's this? What would be a funny analogy to maths? Maybe CAFS, Community and Family Studies. 79 is Ines's HSC mark. Her exam mark was low, but her rank got her a high exam mark from one of the other students in the room, and that pulled her up. Okay, see how that works? Oh, sorry, yeah, no, you're right. It is 60. Sorry guys, I missed the number up the top. 60. Thank you. Great. Thanks guys. Thank you. Screwed up. Okay. So that makes this bottom thing more interesting. Average of 80 and 60 is 70. So Bronson's HSC mark is 70. Okay? So you sort of see how this is working. The ranks are determining this last column. But because, and this shows the two ends of the spectrum, right? Ines she sort of didn't do well in her exam, but her rank saved her and pulled her up nearly 20 points, right? That's what a good internal rank can do for you. It can save you from a bad exam. However, in Bronson's case, his 50, right? He's also jumped up 20 points because he improved so substantially in the exam. Yeah? Do you see how that improvement, wherever you do well, it's going to correspond, right? But what's really important is this final performance in the exam. Yeah? This final performance is guaranteed to be yours, so it's really important that you maximize it. Okay? These other two are more interesting, right? So the other two marks as they stand are 80 and 85. They're the two missing. So that's been allocated. That's been allocated. These are the two missing ones in the middle. They don't just necessarily go straight to the necessary person. It's a little more complicated than that. Again, it's about keeping relative gap. Jess was quite close to Ines. Okay, so it's the way that the system works is that she'll be allocated a mark that's also quite close to the highest exam mark. So in this case, let's say it's actually a 90. I have no idea what it would be. I'm just making up a number. That number was never actually received by anyone in the room, but it's a result of shifting the results up so that Jess stays close to Ines where she was internally. Does that make sense? I'm asking rhetorical questions, but definitely feel free to actually say if that makes sense in the comments if you want to, and ask questions. Mick, similar deal. Mick was a fair bit ahead of Bronson, right? Or a fair bit ahead of last place. So he will get a mark that's a fair bit ahead of the lowest mark of 60. So he's, let's say 75 just for giggles, right? So because this distance is large, because that distance is large, the distance between his mark and the bottom mark is also quite large. Okay? that roughly makes sense because maybe it would probably even be a bit higher, maybe 78. Okay, I'm making up numbers. I don't actually know what, I'm not doing the maths in front of you, but this is roughly how you should think of the system. So Jess would get a 94, the average of those two. And Mick would get a mark 78, 85. What's the average of those two things? When you round it up, it's 82, I think. Okay, so the highest performer was Jess, who performed consistently and improved in her exam and in her internals. Okay, she came second internally, but still got a higher HSC mark. This happened to me. I, in legal studies, got a 98 in my exam and a 97 internally, meaning that and actually this is good because this reflects the fact that first place and I in legal studies were very close, which explains why my assessment mark was very close to the highest mark. Interesting thing about this is I got a state rank in legal studies, and the person who came first in my school didn't, which we're good friends, but it was very strange and a little bit weird, but I came second in this course internally. I got a state rank and she didn't, based on my exam mark. Okay, so this is the system. This is how it works. This internal mark is a result of the rank and where you sit in the cohort. Well, that's the same thing, but your cohort's performance and where you sit in that cohort. Okay, the way to think about ranking is this. It's that if you are in a rank, I'm going to come back to me because I haven't been on school. Okay, so I hope that example sort of helps. Again, look at the example in the guide. I'm going to pop in the Instagram bio soon. So the way you can sort of think about rankings is that if you're sitting in a position where you'd be happy with the marks you're receiving, you're in a good position. What I mean by that is just check. Sorry, I just had a thought. How much time do I have? I've got enough time. Okay. What I mean by that is if you're sitting at third and you look at the person and you look at the third highest mark in the room and you're like, yeah, I just did my assessment task and I came third, but the third highest mark in the room, no, a better way to think of it is you've sort of always got an idea of the cohort where they sit, right? If you are coming third and you look at sort of the person you expect you look at the sort of the top 3 of your cohort of your class, and you're like, yeah, those are people I'd be happy to sort of be grouped with, then you're doing really well. If you're coming rank that's lower than that, and you're like, I'm sort of out of that range where I'd be happy with, that's when you sort of start to think my rank isn't where it needs to be. That's a loose sort of way to think about it. The big thing with ranks is that it's not a big deal because a really strong performance by you makes up for it, and a really strong performance by your cohort makes up for it. So the big thing to keep in mind is this is sort of my golden rule. The lower your rank, the more you rely on your cohort to perform for you. That's the way it works, okay? So what it means is that if you guys are in a rank that you're unhappy with, you shouldn't be being ultra competitive. You need to be helping your cohort, because the lower down you are in rank, the more you're relying on others to pull you up. And that's not a bad thing. I like this. It encourages collaboration. It encourages schools to push each other up, because what it means is after assessment marks are finalized, you're in it together because you want this pool of exam marks in your school to be as high as it can be. So once assessment marks are locked and done, you need to be working with people as closely as you can because you want to maximize everyone's performance. That's why the good schools keep doing well, because they push each other up and everyone sort of does well and pushes each other up. That's why that happens. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the questions. Okay, here we go. So essentially the marks you get in your internal assessment isn't significant, it's the rank that gets you. Precisely. The relative differences matter, like how close you are to each other, but the absolute value, like the actual marks themselves, don't matter. Great, dead on, you've got it exactly right. Does anyone outside of our school affect our marks? Not here. So moderation, which is this whole process of making the internal marks matched to the exam marks, that is unaffected by other schools. That's just your school. So the student with the highest internal mark receives the highest exam mark, yes, and then that gets so close, welcome by the way. That process is the alignment. Sorry, the words mixed up, is the moderation. So the highest student, who was it? Ines, her getting this 98 as her internal mark, that is moderation. That's the process. It works differently for Ines, Jess, Mick, and Bronson because their ranks are different. Ines's moderation is she gets the highest exam mark in the room. She still has her exam mark of 60. I know this is backwards. She still gets her exam mark of 60, but it's averaged with the highest. That's her moderation. Bronson's moderation is he got the lowest mark in the room, right? Which happened to be Ines's. It was 60, right? Mick and Jess's was some sort of sliding effect to maintain relative distance. That's a little bit more obscure. There's math behind it. It's not really that important. Would you say that getting a high internal rank is more important? No, it's not. Performing well in the final exam is the most important thing by a long shot. Internal ranks are a safety net. That's how I think of them. Internal ranks are a safety net. If we haven't achieved as highly as we like early in the year, do we still have time? Absolutely. I was ranked second last in my Extension 1 math class at the point of half yearlies. So I did my Extension 1 half yearly. After it, I was ranked second last. I still came first in the course because I worked my ass off and did really well in subsequent tasks. You can absolutely come back. When does your ATAR come into it? Hopefully in about 2 minutes because I'm running out of time. How well did TAFE subject scale? Scaling's coming. I know, I'm sorry, I'm taking longer than I normally do. Isn't your ATAR mark, your school assessment mark, and your exam mark averaged? No. Okay, I'm going to talk about the ATAR in 2 seconds. I'm just going to get through these last few questions. Can your assessment mark be different to any exam mark received in your class? Yes. So again, the first and last are a direct copy, usually. There are some things, apparently, I've read about some things that prevent super outliers from impacting other people. I don't know exactly what those are, but apparently they exist. So there's that, take it for what it's worth. So there's that. But these people in the middle, so the first and last are almost always a direct copy. Everyone else is a sliding effect. So yeah, absolutely, they don't have to match. That's what this example sort of showed. So yeah, you're doing the compressed curriculum. Perfect. Well done on getting a 91 and a 90 for English. Well done. Go you. Yeah, it doesn't have to match. That's just the nature of the system. Okay. Someone's laughing because they can come back in 3 years. Absolutely they can. My teacher, I had a really good teacher and he motivated me and just said, look, mathematically it's not that big of a deal. Just work your ass off and you never know. And I ended up just scraping back into first by the end of trials. Does it matter if you're towards the bottom 50% of your cohort in rank but are averaging about 90%? That's an interesting case. And my answer is no. And the reason for that is because in a cohort where half the class is getting 90%, that's a good cohort to be in. And at that point, rank stops mattering because most of you are going to get a band 6, right? So it doesn't matter as much in cohorts like that, but that's a very, very rare situation to be in. It could also be that your assessments are a little on the easier side. I don't actually know. Yeah, it just depends a little bit, but I would say that doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm going to talk about the ATAR now. Scaling. The whole point of this stream was scaling. And I'm running out of time because my Q&A, my lives are capped in an hour, so I need to... Not by me, by Instagram. Okay. So here's where we're at. On the... Oh, I think I know the day. Hold on a second. While I talk, I'll try and find the day. On the something of December this year, you will get a text with this information in it. With an exam mark, which is the aligned exam mark. Talked about that. The assessment mark. That's the moderated assessment mark. We talked about that. They will average to give you a HSC mark and then a performance band. Okay, so I'm going to start. So these two things we've talked about where they come from. They'll average to give you this and a performance band, which is just, yeah, whatever. These things go to NISA. Sorry, no. These things are generated by NISA. This is NISA's work. Mine was Bostis back when I did it. But this is NISA's gift to you as a HSC student. Merry Christmas. So what happens from there is that this stuff gets sent to UAC, and UAC uses it to calculate your ATAR. Your ATAR advice notice looks a little bit like this. Or I don't know if they still send it, but I'm guessing I don't think they send this anymore. I don't actually know. Saving paper, all that sort of stuff. December 13th. Thank you. I was still looking for it. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. So on December 13th, you will get a text message with this. And on December 14th, unless they've changed it, you will get this. Yeah? Again, you log into UAC portal and you see this. So you will get, this is all just repeats of what happened, although there is something interesting. You will get your ATAR, right? Oh, they do send it. Love it. I'm glad they're not cutting out everything that's pretty. This was pretty, you know, it's nice to get pretty pieces of paper. Okay. And then that ATAR comes from December 17. Oh, we've got some conflict. Anyway, I don't really care about the date. I want to try and get on to the specifics of the ATAR. I'm running out of time. Okay. So what you'll notice is they'll tell you which units counted towards the ATAR. Most of you know that it's only 10 units that count. It's your best 10. So for me, it just happened to be that music was the one that didn't count. And you can see that here because the units included is 0. Okay. That's how that will look to you. So they'll pick the 10 that will give you the best ATAR. They don't pick the 10 highest marks. They pick the best 10 for your ATAR. That's obvious for me because music for me, whoa, zoom out. Music for me was a higher mark than physics. Yeah, see that? 95 versus 92. But they still counted physics over the top of music. And guess where that comes from? That comes from scaling. So let's really quickly talk about scaling. In principle, is quite simple. It's about making sure the marks line up between courses in a way that's fair and consistent. The way they do that is actually it's heavily mathematical, but this is essentially how it works. The scaling of a course is dependent on how well that cohort, and at this point when I talk about cohort, I mean everyone in the state. So when I say physics cohort, I mean the entirety of the physics cohort in the state. The scaling of physics is based on how well the physics cohort performed in their exams and in the HSC across the board, right? So if you have a physics cohort that's really driven and does well in all their exams, physics scales well. That's how it works, roughly spoken. I'm not going into specifics because I think it's just unnecessary, right? So the natural question is, what exactly does scaling look like in terms of marks? What kind of effect does it have? For this, I refer you to the Bible of scaling, the best ever written. And I'm not just saying this because I want UAC to like us. It's actually such a great document. It's called the UAC Scaling Report. So I'm going to just Google it, UAC report. Typing with my right hand only is a little annoying. UAC report on scaling. And I'm going to go the 2017 one because it's the most recent complete report. Okay, so this is a great report. If you're at all interested in the specifics of this process, I highly recommend you give it a read. It is highly detailed. The table we want is one of these ones down here. Which one is it? It is descriptive statistics and selected percentiles, table A3. Okay, that's the one I'm going to be talking about. There's really interesting things in here though, like course enrollments, distributions of marks by course. There's all sorts of interesting stuff. Very much recommend giving it a read. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the table A3. Table A3, table A3. Lots of good examples on how scaling works. Great, it's honestly such a good read. If you're like, I'm summarizing it, but if you want more than what I'm giving you, highly recommend this as a read for anyone who's interested. This is a good table. This isn't what I'm looking for, but it's A2. This tells you what percentage of students get in each performance band. So for example, 13% of students get a band 6 in Aboriginal studies, but only 1% of people get a band 6 in English standard. That is why standard is so hard. That's why you hear about standard being so hard to do well in, because only 1% of students get a band 6 in. So the table I want, that's worth a read if you're interested. The one I want is table A3, scaling. Okay, so if you want to know exactly what scaling does to your class, to your subject, again, it's based entirely on how well that cohort performs in the HSC. If you want a feel for what that does, go to this table, and it will show you how it does for all the subjects in the HSC. I think all of them except for like ones with 10 people or less. So here's how it works. You've got things up the top, percentiles. All this means is this is the mark that the top 1% got, 10%, 25%, etc., etc. So let's go to a course I did. Let's go to mathematics. So mathematics. This top column is the mean or the average. So the average mark was 39.2. Again, that's out of 50. Keep that in mind. So you double it if it's a 2-unit course. So that'd be just shy of 78.4. So 78. Let's go with that. 78 was the average mark.
and it scales down to an average mark of 62. And this is a few selected data sets, or a few selected data points of exactly what the HSC mark was, again, double it because it's a 2-unit course, and what it scales to. What you will notice is that it scales down. That happens everywhere, so don't be scared about the fact that the number goes down. That's just how the system works. The number goes down everywhere. In one place it goes up, and I bet you can guess where that is. In Extension 2 Mathematics. That's the one place where the marks actually go up instead of down. That's why MX2 scales so well. And again, it's because MX2 students, on average, just do so well across the board that their subject scales super, super well. I think Music Extension might have a similar effect. No, it doesn't. Music Extension is such a well-scaling course, but even it doesn't do the same thing. MX2 is just, as a scaling thing, such an outlier, it's not funny. So, this is a really good table for this, and you can see it for all the subjects. You can sort of see for what scaling, flip back to me for dramatic effect. What scaling sort of does is that if you're below the average, that's when scaling starts to hurt a little bit. So the question I always get is, if you're doing a bad scaling subject, does it matter? The answer is no, as long as you're performing well in that course. I'm going to say poorly, I don't like that word, but doing below the average, I guess, in a low scaling subject can really hurt you. Classic example, and I hate to do it to visual arts students, but it's just the one that's in front of me. So, 37.5 in, let's go physics, let's find something. Oh no, dead on, perfect. So here's a 37.5 in physics. It scales to a 31.8, again, out of 50, right? Is that physics row? It is. Great. Cool. So that is physics. It's 37.5 to a 31.8. Visual arts, 37.5 to a 12.8. That's the difference it makes. And the reason for that is because the average for visual arts is 40.1. You've slipped below the average there, and that's when it starts to hurt, right? If you want to be comfortable that scaling is going to do good things for you, the trick is, or the sort of the blanket rule, is to be above the average. Now, I want to preface that with something really, really important. Scaling doesn't matter, right? Because any benefit of a high scaling subject is totally offset by the fact that physics doesn't scale bad. Physics, if you look at comparisons to other courses, physics scales quite well. Again, all the marks go down. That's just how they all go lower. I want to stress that. Don't panic about the marks going down. They all go down. So the way to think about scaling is that it's an equalizer, right? Any benefit that Maths Extension 2 students get from doing the course that scales significantly better than a lot of others is offset by the fact that their exams are harder and that their course is more difficult. And it's not that the scaling is good because of that. It's just because it's a sort of indirect relationship, right? The course is difficult, meaning only really talented students do it, meaning that the students in there do well everywhere, and that's what pulls the scaling up. It's an indirect relationship, right? I hope that sort of makes sense, okay? So don't be worried about scaling. Like I did music, it's the worst scaling subject you can do if you're in the low ranges. But I guess the thing to keep in mind is that if you are doing a subject that doesn't scale ideally, then you just want to work hard at it and make sure you are giving everything to it. It's when you start to bludge off in those low scaling subjects that it starts to impact you a little bit. I hope that makes sense, and I hope it doesn't panic anybody. Because scaling is honestly nothing to worry about. Again, trust that UAC knows what they're doing. This system is fair, even though the numbers might seem a little bit confronting, okay? Yes, Matt, that's exactly right. Matty, that's exactly what it is. So it's not how well the physics students do in physics, it's how well the physics students do everywhere. That's how it works. It's like a massive set of simultaneous equations. Mathematically, that's what it is, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to go through some... Oh, before I do, so the important bit. Swap, that was awkward. Okay, so you will get a scaled mark like this for each of your 10 units. Those will be summed to form an aggregate mark. Aggregate just meaning sum or total. Those aggregates get ranked literally from first to last in the state out of ATAR eligible students, and they then assign ATARs in order. That's the end of it, simple. Sum the scaled marks, rank them up, line them up in order, and then dish out ATARs. And there's special math that goes into deciding how many people get each ATAR. There's a table on it. Where is it? Where are we? Distributions of ATAR. No. There is a table on this. I can't remember which table it is. Maybe I won't be able to find it. Here we go. So they line your aggregates up, your summed scaled marks for your best 10 units, and then they assign the ATARs, right? And this, you can sort of see how many people get each ATAR. So it's about 40 to 50 people per mark in the high 90s. And they don't go into that much detail, but you can sort of see it's just under 1,000 people per 2 points. That's roughly how it tends to sit, right? But then that's in the high range. And then as you get further down and it starts being worth only 1 point at a time, then you get more people in there. You have so many people in the range of 70 to 90, because that's where the crux of people are, and that's where most of the ATARs are dished out. You can look at this table for some of the more specific numbers, I guess. But that's it. That's the start to finish. Oh, I swapped. That's the system from start to finish. So your exam marks are aligned, your internal marks are moderated, those are sent off to UAC, or the average of them is sent off to UAC. UAC uses them and scales them based on the performance of that cohort in all their subjects, and then they line all the marks up in order and dish out your ATARs one by one. That's it. The average ATAR, interestingly, is not 50, as you might expect, because they save places at the bottom for people who aren't eligible for ATARs. So the bottom places are taken up by people who don't actually ever get one. The average ATAR is normally in the 60s or 70s. I think it's like high 60s or something. I did know this off the top of my head once. I don't anymore. Okay, I'm going to go back through some of the questions we got in that last section and keep an eye on the clock, because I need to finish this before the hour is up. Otherwise, I will lose this live and I will be mad at myself and you will all be mad at me. How does 11 units work? So they will take your best 10, even if that means cutting a 2-unit subject in half. So they'll always take your best 10, however that looks. I've been told Extension 2 Math is worth 150 aggregate marks. That's bogus. No, wrong. Sorry, that came out really badly. No, that's not correct. How do TAFE ATAR courses work is only the HSC exam counts towards your final mark in ATAR, and there are no rankings for assessments. So from my understanding, it's literally just the exam. That's what UAC is sent. So they align the marks for the exam and just send that off. The moderation bit is skipped. And if you want to see how they scale, go to that table. Again, UAC scaling report. It's a fantastic document. I wish I had time to just go through the table. I normally do, but I took longer than usual tonight. I don't normally do the example with the maths, so that's what got me, I think. If your 1 unit subject mark is better than it, yes, so it said that before, it will split them for you. English standard. So look, English standard is a tough one because it is statistically very difficult to do well in. However, it is possible. 1% of students get it every year. That is like hundreds of students who manage it. You can do it if you put in the work and work hard. If you resign yourself to the fact that it's not going to happen, it won't happen. So work hard and you will, you just got a gun for it anyway, right? Look, struggling in English is so common. We're going to try and do a lot to help you guys with English over the next coming months. Is doing bad in English standard and English advanced the same thing? Not quite. Do I have time? Yeah, I do. So you can sort of see the difference in scaling, right? It depends what you mean by bad. Where's A3? This is A6. What's this? That's A4. Cool, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so you can see the average mark in standard is 35 doubled is roughly 70, and the average mark in advanced is 80, so you can sort of see the difference there. And then if you compare the scaling is significantly worse for standard, right? You can sort of see, not significantly worse, but there is a bit of a difference in this high range, right? And I'll leave you to look at the specifics of that. Basically, more of a cushion. That's how I'd think about it. How am I going on time? 5 minutes for questions. Great. Okay. If I get 96 in 2U maths, I would have to get higher than 96 for the raw mark of the actual exam. No. So if you get a 96 in 2-unit maths, that's this thing. That's not controlled by NISA. That's not controlled by UAC. So those numbers going down you just saw then, you never see that. The 96 is here. Chances are you got lower. Like if my exam mark in 2-unit was 96, my raw exam mark was probably lower. I could go back to the raw marks database and figure it out. It was probably high 80s. or maybe low 90s, who knows. So no, you don't. You actually probably don't have to get that high at all. Does Music 2 scale bad? No, Music 2 is one of the best non-extension courses you can do. Ironic, because Music 1 is so not great, so there's that. How did scaling work in your case? Well, so what happened with me is that my 95 in music scaled to be lower than my 92 in physics, and so therefore physics counted over Music 1. That's how that worked, right? And what it means is that music scaled lower than everything else, and so music was discarded, the units counting towards it was 0, and so that was that. Cool. So is a 300 out of 500 aggregate mark a 90 ATAR? I don't know. Let me have a look. So there is a table comparing aggregate marks to ATARs. Let me sort of see if I can find that table on the fly. Again, in the report, but there is a sort of mapping. You can see how it worked as in a year-by-year thing. It was different every year. The website is, I don't know, Google it, UAC Scaling Report 2017. The 2018 one isn't done yet. It'll be out soon, but 2017 gives you how it worked for the 2017 cohort. UAC Scaling Report. I recommend you go read it. Giorgio, that will answer your question as well. Google it. UAC Scaling Guide. Thank you, Ruby. I appreciate it. How did TAFE ATAR courses work? I've answered that already. How do you memorize essays? I'll try to focus on the scaling questions. Sorry, only because we're running out of time. How does someone get 100 out of 100 for an English exam if all the subjects scale a bit lower? So again, when you say you get 100 out of 100, you're seeing this mark, right? Everything going down happens behind the scenes in UAC headquarters. I imagine they're sitting there on their computers and sending them or whatever. When you see 100 out of 100, they mean this mark here, right? That's unaffected by that downwards effect of scaling, I guess. So that's how that works. Emily did it. Our English lecturer got 100 out of 100 in English. She got 110 raw in the exam, I believe. So she smashed it. Yep, 2 minutes left. I need to finish it on time, otherwise I'll lose it. It will be 100% recorded and posted. Check on YouTube in the coming days. Tests, I don't know what test scores are, I'm sorry. I might you know what I'll do? I might post a follow-up Q&A on this tomorrow, and I will field questions. When I post it on YouTube, I'll post a follow-up Q&A, like written version, to follow up as well. Fiona, yes, that's roughly what I'm saying. Like, performance in trials and beyond is the most important thing. So if you're doing really well from trials onwards, that's going to be a really good thing for you. I mean, your rank is based only on internal assessment, so the trials is where it would need to happen. But trials are worth a significant chunk of marks, so it's possible that you can go from second to first in trials. Absolutely. I did it in MX1. I got mainly, you're thinking of dropping to standard. Jade, if you are at all... Oh, it comes up with a timer now. That's good. Jade, if you're at all doing okay in English, I would recommend to stay in advanced. The workload is quite similar. It's just slightly higher order thinking, and I think it's just more beneficial to everyone to do advanced if they're at all capable of doing so. But you do you. It is a slightly bit more work. You can definitely do well in standard if you choose. I'm not going to get time to get to all these. I've got a minute. Speed run. Is it true that if you're coming first in trials, then your HSC you'll get highest mark? You need to go back and watch the rest of the live when I post it. That will answer your question. If you have 11 units, they'll pick the best 10, even if that means splitting up a 2-unit subject. If you drop a subject, does the subject still go to the HSC? No, you have to sit the exam and meet the assessment criteria. I've never answered questions this fast. So even though your scaled music 1 mark for average was higher than physics, it still didn't count because it scales lower. Exactly. Thanks for the advice. Okay, all right, I'm going to call it there because I've got 60 seconds left to wrap this up. Hope you enjoy. Far out, that was fast. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. I'll post the whole thing on YouTube, and I'll post a place for follow-up questions somewhere, either here or on the forums. Hope you guys got some benefit out of this. There's going to be more Q&As coming up on the forums with some of our tutors who state ranked their subjects, so keep an eye out for that. atarnotes.com for all awesome HSC resources. Yeah, I hope you guys got a lot out of this. Have a really great week, and I'll do another update next week to keep you informed as to what's coming up. Catch you later. Enjoy maths. Have a great evening. See you later, guys. Bye. My name is not Craig. Bye.